Ari, what is your first reaction?
My first reaction is the most important parts of this letter are the direct quotes from the Mueller report. Everything else is Barr's views and conclusions, which are also significant since he's Mueller's boss, but are not the Mueller report everyone's been waiting for. And anyone in any field knows that there's plenty that can be done with characterization and conclusion. So in those direct quotes, there is clearly, as you've been reporting, good news for the Trump campaign and President Trump, in that it echoes what we really knew as a clue from Friday night, because this ended without any indictments on collusion, election conspiracy. And here we see a quote of a finding that there was not a collusion, election conspiracy between the Russian government and the Trump campaign and associates. Now, there isn't supposed to be one. That's something most campaigns take for granted. They're not even suspected of. Yeah. But it is, obviously, after a 22-month probe, a very significant finding. Second, I think where we're going to see a huge fight, and this is what I've really been reading into in the letter, is we see already some gap distance between Mueller's take on obstruction, what he actually carefully did in what we understand to be his conclusions, and Barr going further. So let me tell you what I mean, and then we could get into it more if you like or you have time. We see very clearly, as you were just discussing with regard to the overstatement by the White House, that Bob Mueller looked at potential obstruction, looked at that evidence, went through it and investigated it, and said that the president is not exonerated, nor is he, in the view of Mueller, guilty of a federal crime within the ambit of his probe. So that is, to put it simply, a middle ground. And this letter then goes well beyond that. It accurately quotes that. So credit to Barr that we only know that because he's quoting this, and we don't have any reason to think he's misquoting it. But then having said that, Barr goes much further and says he now, today, after what we know to be a short time, 2 days, has concluded on his own that there's no obstruction by the president. Now, if that rings in people's ears, it should, because people may remember that in the case of President Clinton or President Nixon, the questions around presidential obstruction as a potential high crime are generally dealt with, or as lawyers would say, adjudicated by the House, not by the president's own Justice Department. And so that right there is a glaring sign. And that, I think, is interesting.
Well, what they had with Bill Clinton was that he perjured himself. There was a difference there.
Well, I'm not referring to the underlying facts. But the comparison I'm making is that the House was the decision maker on determining obstruction, meaning whatever you think happened. Let's say you say for the argument President A didn't obstruct and President B did. Who decides that? Well, in our constitutional system, the reason why these probes are so volatile is, without predetermining anything about tonight's letter, it is typically the House that deals with presidential abuses of power if they are investigated or believed to have occurred. And so Barr, let's make no mistake here, he's within his lawful authority. We've been reporting that he's been doing this by the book, but he is making a judgment call that ultimately, in cases where there have been found abuses of power, it's not the Attorney General who has the last word on that. So that's him coming out of the gates in this letter and saying, I'm quoting that Mueller found no election conspiracy, boom. I'm quoting that Mueller came to a middle ground, that is to say, did not reach a final conclusion saying the president did or didn't commit obstruction, and now I'm going to tip on that and say he didn't. And whether in our system of government and whether the Congress wants to deal with that or not, I think is a big open question today.
Ari, stick with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.